Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's Tough Love Tuesday, and Tracy Cromwell here, your integrative nutrition health coach, personal trainer, precision nutrition health coach, and I have this cool other shirt now, Wellness Warrior, my Wellness Warrior T-shirt. Anyway, so I want to welcome everybody who's watching live, and then also anyone watching on the recording and also on the podcast. And just to give everybody a heads up, you can stream this on YouTube. It streams live on YouTube as well as, we've got it on Facebook here, and then also my other personal pages. And anyway, but let's see. Just had something flash up on my screen that kind of distracted me. So sorry about that. But yeah, in terms of the podcast, if you want to ever re-listen, you can find my podcast, Your Personal Journey with Food, on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google, and many of the other streaming platforms. Okay. So anyway, there's that. I thought today would be fun. I have these icebreakers and what are they called? Table topics. And so I thought I would pull one out and talk about whatever it was that came from it. And so I used my little icebreaker cards called Best Self. And the one I chose, I thought I would go into the orange, which is deep. And it came up and said, and it was perfect for tonight. It said, how do you get in the way of your success? And I thought that was interesting because I'm talking a bit about that tonight. And I promise you, this is the one I pulled. But I thought I would go ahead and answer that question live tonight. How do I get in the way of my success? Mine is I still battle with perfectionism, and I allow perfectionism to slow me down. Makes me sometimes, especially with me, gives me that perfectionism somehow is able to say, hey, gives me all these excuses, right? And so that is basically, how do you get in the way of your own success? So you can also answer that question on your own, or if you want to put it in the comments, that'd be great. But mine is perfectionism. It doesn't affect me as much anymore. I've tackled it in terms of my food, my exercise, my relationship with myself. And I think too, though, I think on anything sometimes that I'm moving into as a new skill, something that I'm a bit afraid of, makes my perfectionism raise to really, really high levels sometimes. In some areas, you really, really want that perfectionism. And in some areas, it just can get in the way. So anyway, that's mine. It'd be fun to see if anyone wants to comment. That'd be great on what gets in the way of your success. And as I'm going to talk about today, sometimes it's just the way, again, what's our narrative? What are we saying to ourselves? And I did an episode on this last week, but if you watched a lot of my shows, you know that, or you've listened in, that a lot of things I talk about are mindset, because that is the driver. That's what runs this ship that we live in. And so talking about that. So anyway, going to talk again about how we can rewrite our story, and reframing our narratives, that in a way that can transform our lives. And I've had to do that, like I said, in a lot of ways with my perfectionism. So anyway, what I want to discuss tonight is how we can build confidence and gain self-acceptance through changing that narrative. So what do the thoughts in your head tell you? And we've talked about that a lot in my book, Your Personal Journey with Food. That's discussed a lot. What are we saying to ourselves? So if you were to explain to somebody, what type of person you were, what would you say you would tell them? And sometimes that's, would you focus on your appearance? Would you be focusing on what you do as a living, your accomplishments? Would you focus on your personality? What is that narrative in your mind? And so, when we can think of ourselves, when we do that in a private space, in our mind, that creates a perspective that can sometimes be hard to shake, when it comes to taking advantage of opportunities, taking risks that could help us, and ultimately reaching our goals. And interesting enough, like I said, perfectionism is one of those things. But yeah, how do you describe yourself? So, um, figuring out what that is can really help bring insights into why possibly. And I'll bring this to food, relationships with yourself. How does that affect that narrative and that perspective of yourself? Um, I said I was going to bring up ideas that you could put right into action tonight. The first one is stop. We want to stop comparing ourselves, to others. So to reframe that, maybe I'd be saying, I'm going to focus on me and my attributes and what I can bring forth, and that makes it more positive, So I'm going to focus on me and what I can bring forth, into the community, into my career, whatever that might be. So a lot of us can get insecure by, comparing ourselves to other people. And, what's interesting is that though, if we look closer at other people's lives, the flaws are there. Nobody's life is perfect, but how we present ourselves to others or how we see others, we can sometimes just see them, we think and assume everything's perfect. And then we create a narrative in our mind and a perspective in our mind that's not real, but then also, that makes us feel, you know, a bit, um, you know, a bit down on who we are. So even the perfect celebrity that you idolize, they're still a regular person. They still have challenges. They still have, fears and, dislikes about themselves. So you're not alone there. So number one is focus on you, focus on what you can bring to the world versus comparing yourself to others. The other thing would be, which I touched on already, is we don't want to compare your behind the scenes, what's going on in your behind the scenes with what someone else is putting out into that highlight reel, right? And again, it's social media, right? So, everyone loves to bring out the best of themselves on social media. So we just have to remember that everybody is a human being. And again, comparing our normal everyday life that has challenges with what we see in the social media feed, you know, it's not a true comparison. So that will be very helpful. Um, so we want to keep in mind that, gosh, when somebody posts their incredible vacation, that usually something goes awry on that vacation, or there's some tension or stress trying to get there and back, and not everything's perfect. So remembering that can really help that narrative in your mind. And so keep a focus on that. How are you feeling and what are your perceptions of that? Okay. The other thing, and I talk about this so much because it was one thing I had to really learn about myself, but everyone's on their own time. Okay. So this is really important. Um, so if you're feeling like you're left behind or somebody else is a lot farther ahead in their life, or gosh, Joe's already lost the 50 pounds and I haven't, and or shoot, they've already bought a house and I haven't, or all those kinds of things. Everyone's on their own journey. And I'm going to bring this right back to journey with food, journey with your relationship with you. You're on your own time, you're on your own journey, and it's one that you have to walk, and it's one that you'll want to be fully experiencing. Once I realized that, again, I stopped comparing myself to other people. I put the blinders on, I focused on me and my body, and I figured out what foods worked for me. Was incredible. So again, everyone's on their own timeline. That doesn't mean anything's wrong with yours. And giving yourself that opportunity to say, hey, I'm on this timeline and I'm learning from the timeline will really help you a great deal. So meet yourself where you're at. When I was in school, one thing that I was taught was to meet my clients where they're at. I'll have a perception of where they might be when they show up for a session. And their day could be totally different than what I expected. There, things that happened in the last 48 hours can change the whole perspective of our coaching session. And I embrace where they are. I embrace that. So you can do that for yourself as well. Um, Another thing is to ask yourself is, do your mistakes keep you up at night? Mine sure as hell can. Pardon my French. Like I said, that narrative in my brain can kind of go crazy. So we all know that we've made mistakes in our lives, but we don't all interpret them the same way. So again, our perspective of a mistake we may have made can change everything for us and how we feel about that, um, and the way we think about those mistakes. So, you know, something you failed at, and this was hard for me to learn, something you failed at could actually be one of the biggest blessings in disguise you could have ever had. And that's happened to me so many times. Can you think of a mistake or failure that actually ended up being an incredible blessing in disguise? Um, I think for me, mine was, making choices, making decisions that I was a yo-yo dieter and that I made myself a pre-diabetic and I couldn't handle my food. I didn't have the ability to um, manage my food. And then at the same time in 2008 losing my job in the housing crisis. It was a traumatic time for me. It was awful. I was a failure. I had all these thoughts going through my mind. And but as I look back now, that chiseled me into somebody that I never thought I could become. And so, those thoughts at night that you may have, they can actually spin an amazing blessing on your life. So, um, all right. So a quick check in. So, is there something in your past that you may feel a failure at or ashamed at, right? Is there? So check in with yourself on that. And that's okay because we all have these things. And which makes me want to talk about the topic of shame versus guilt, because as I want to bring this back to food, your relationship with food, your relationship with yourself and your body, there's shame and guilt show up with food a lot. All right. So, um, there is a difference though in these. So, guilt can actually be a positive thing. It can motivate us to move to better behavior. So, we've learned a lesson. Apologizing for breaking someone's glass while you're at their house. You may feel bad and guilty about it, but you apologize, and you'll probably, a lot gentler with whatever it was that you broke in their home. It's just a simple thing, but you can learn from something like that. And sometimes the guilt could be a lot heavier, a lot deeper, but it's a really great lesson. Shame, however, is a bit different, and it can actually be very paralyzing. And so, if you're thinking about your relationship with food, sometimes we have, um, you know, guilt and shame associated with eating. All right. So, the aspect is um, shame, however, is a paralyzing global assessment of oneself as a person, and shame can form a lens through which all self evaluation is viewed. So that means you can view things through shame versus viewing through a lens of, a supportive environment and things like that. So, another way to think about the difference between guilt and shame is being told or thinking that we did something bad versus being told or thinking that we are something bad. So doing versus is or are. All right. So one area that I remember, um, and thankfully my parents took care of this right away, but we went to a childcare when I was pretty young. And um, and I remember I think it was a pretty gosh, it had to be 1970. It's probably in the like 1970s, so way back then. But anyway, we were at childcare, my sister and I, and it was nap time. We were all in cots, and we weren't supposed to talk. And I had somebody, this young guy, kind of antagonizing me. And I remember telling him to be quiet and I was scolding him. So I got caught and I got shamed and I got put in a dark closet for being such a bad person at as being a 4-year-old, being locked in this dark closet. And I will always remember that day, because my sister Gretchen, who was with me, she valiantly went in there with me so that I didn't have to sit in the dark by myself. But I remember thinking that I was a bad person, and so it's interesting how those things can stem into your life, and it's still a memory I remember so vividly. But so I had shame associated with that, if I was put in this dark closet as a 4-year-old, I must be a really bad person, right? So we don't know where these things come from sometimes. So if we can figure that out, then you can go ahead and move forward with why maybe you get a feeling of some kind. And I'll talk about that here in a moment when we talk about triggers. But but again, talking about where does this come from? So again, shame is that we are a bad person versus guilt is we did something that probably wasn't a very good idea. So again, it can come from all sorts of experiences, like I just told you. But again, it's usually cultivated by the belittlement of our efforts, achievements, or some of our ideas, even. Um, Statements can be told to us like, why are you doing it that way? Or what do you think? What were you thinking? Or why can't you be more like so and so or something? But it comes in various different ways. And it's very important for us to know and understand where that came from. And, we want to also realize that we can internalize over time this feeling, which can then expand upon itself and expand upon itself. And again, change our perspective of how we think and how we view ourselves. One of the best things we can do, and just me talking about what happened in this one scenario, is we want to bring it to light. We want to bring shame into the light. Once I started talking about the fact that I'd been pre-diabetic, that I was a yo-yo dieter, that I couldn't manage my food, all of a sudden the shame associated with my inability to handle those things got lighter and lighter. I also found there were other people out there that were dealing with the same struggle. So I was no longer alone in that dark closet, I guess I should say, as a 4-year-old, shamed, like that, and made to feel like a horrible person. I realized that when we talk about it, we have somebody that we can speak to, that we realize we aren't alone. And then shame can't control us anymore, right? So there's a really great quote here from Dr. Brene Brown. She says, "When we bury the story, we forever stay the subject of the story. If we own the story, we get to narrate the ending." And I have to tell you, that is what I'm experiencing. The things that happened in the past for me and things like that, when I talk about them and I bring them into the light, they no longer own me ever. I still have feelings about them, but they don't necessarily own me like they used to when I kept them, hidden in the dark. So you want to bring it to light so it can't narrate your life for you. You can narrate your life, and create your own story and narrate, what's going to happen. So that's really an empowering moment to do. So you want to bring it to the light. And then you can also reframe it, right? So next time you start feeling down on yourself, think about the vocabulary that you're using. And I talk about this a lot too, talk about it a lot in my book, about the vocabulary that I'm using around something. So when you're feeling bad, quote unquote, bad about something, do you really feel guilty, embarrassed, or humiliated? Figure out what it is you think you're feeling. And and although those feelings are uncomfortable, they don't have to take aim at your self-worth. And they usually don't take aim at your self-worth as much as that shame does that you want to bring to light. Um, so when you slip and fall, let's just say, which I've done too in front of people, I've tripped and fallen and, fell in front of people, but I know that everyone trips and falls. I laugh it off. I'm embarrassed, but that's okay. Great. But again, when we're looking at that shame concept, analyze what you're feeling and why. That will help you untangle it and, and help you step into a more constructive, supportive path to move forward. And so a lot of times we just, it's very hard for the brain to do that, but it does make a huge difference. Huge difference. So here's another one wonderful concept. Who you were does not define who you are. So the past is in the past and we can leave it there. And sometimes that's hard for me. It is hard for me. Sometimes I think about some mistakes I've made that, I wonder if I had made a different choice, or maybe it wasn't a mistake, but if I'd made a different choice. But I can sit and dwell on that kind of stuff and it doesn't do me any good. Maybe if I look back at it, but I take it as, well, what can I learn from that? That's a little bit different. But, I have sometimes, there's some areas I'm still working on that, from my past, to go ahead and leave it there. The other hard part, kind of to get through the past and leave it where it should be, is that it is thought to be a big part of who we are today. But um, another big reminder, and I've talked to clients about this a lot in food, I still truly believe everyone is doing the best that they can at the time in a situation with the knowledge that they have. And once I finally realized that for myself as well, when I was having so much trouble with my food, was I realized I didn't know how to take care of myself. I realized I didn't know how to run this body. I didn't know how to eat to help it get better. And I didn't know how to dissect all the noise around food. So this can be in any career, anything you do in life. Um, you're doing the best you can at the moment. The biggest piece of advice I can give with that is just know, hey, be willing to learn, be a student, and figure it out. Okay. So the best part is if you've had things go on in the past, know that today you're more capable, you're better educated, you're more understanding person that you probably were back then, all because you've experienced more life. So I can vouch for that 100%. Okay. So the past does not have to define who you are today. Um, and another topic point is realize that you have a relationship with your life. So, like I've said in the past, we have a relationship with our body and therefore with ourselves. We also have a relationship with our life. And it's a companion with whom we're going to be in this long term relationship with. So, and every relationship has an up and down. It lulls, you know, um, it has action scenes. So, if we can think of it this way, that it can help you maybe take a different picture look and, at life as a whole. So when you think of your life as something you have a relationship with, it can be easier to adjust your attitude to create what you want out of it. You'll discover that when you change the way you think about your life, you'll be able to play a more proactive role in it. And again, I'm bringing it back to food and your body. Once, once you'll just, you're going to discover that when you change the way you think about your body and your food, you'll be able to play a more proactive role in that relationship. This can be anything, your life, your career, your joy, spirituality, all of those things. So, that's what's so great is realize that you have a relationship with your life. Sometimes it goes great. Sometimes it's a little tougher with your food. It goes really well. It can be a bit tough, that kind of thing. And as with any relationship, we have to nurture it, right? We have to nurture that relationship. So, Gosh, any relationship is capable of falling into disconnection and conflict when it's not nurtured. So, when problems are ignored or when you start going into autopilot mode for too long, you need to step back and gain some perspective. And sometimes it's catching yourself when you're in autopilot. I'm much better at that. Again, speaking about my relationship with food and myself, I can sense autopilot coming back. I start going and choosing different foods. I can feel my body speaking to me and telling me I need to change, which I'm going to talk about that in a second too. But anyway, it's all the same. So you want to think about where you are in life and ask yourself how you're feeling. Are there problems that keep you from moving forward and feeling fulfilled? And by reflecting on the relationship regularly and making adjustments accordingly, you'll learn that it's not as difficult as you might think to change tracks and head in a new direction. Um, and I think that autopilot's a really good point. And sometimes we look at, say, New Year's is when most people take a look at everything and they make their goals. But it's really good to check in on autopilot, make sure you're not going into autopilot and, missing out on opportunities to, make some supportive changes in your life. But looking at that, just checking in like once a month, something like that, so that the swings aren't so dramatic up and down, but more of a rolling, revision, I guess I want to say. So so that's on that. So nurture that relationship with your life and others and also your body and your mind. Um, Here's another great point. You are your life's narrator. So your life's narrator is shaped by your own perceptions, which are created from your belief system. And so, in other words, your reality is based entirely on the way you think about things. And so that's where, if I look through my perfectionist eyes versus my optimistic, supportive eyes, I see two different scenarios. So it's kind of interesting to acknowledge those different lenses and see what the perspective is. So right now you're creating your own reality based on the stories you tell yourself and the way you interpret the world around you. And, think about that. Is this something you've acknowledged before? I didn't used to acknowledge it at all, but through my own journey and just this journey now of doing this research and learning, it's interesting. Yeah. So um, you're your own life's narrator. So you have control of that story. Earlier, I talked about, triggers and things and here's this, we're coming up on that. Know your triggers. So being aware of when your lens perspective changes. So next time, if you start feeling down or bummed out, or you don't think you're going to make a goal, or you're upset because you made a specific choice about what you were eating, or if there's just an emotion and you can't figure out why you're feeling this specific emotion, want to find out where it came from. So it could be a specific TV show that brought about a recollection of a memory that brought a feeling, or was it something that someone might have said that brought up something from the past? Was it a subject matter? Um, did it have to do with relationships with parents or friends, siblings? Oh my gosh, anything. Sometimes it's as much as a smell, a song, or a specific food that can be a trigger. I get it a lot with, songs, not so much anymore. I'm able to put new memories spins on a song, which is helpful, but I definitely had my triggers that all of a sudden I'm like feeling really like melancholy and sad. And I realized, oh gosh, it's that song. And I changed the station. So things like that. So, you want to do your best to connect the dots. And this is going to help you identify the triggers of what makes you feel especially emotional, which then is like a trigger food. Knowing what your trigger foods are that will make it so you overeat. This is very similar. What's the trigger that might make you feel sad or highly emotional. And then you can say, oh, gosh, that's what it is. And so um, as soon as you can name them out, loud, even name them out loud, um, that again gives them less power. But then all of a sudden you can sit there and say, I know why I'm not feeling very happy right now. Because sometimes it just happens and we don't know why, right? So pay attention, is there a specific song? And then also see if you can create a new memory around that thing. I've had to do that a lot. I've lived in the same area most of my life. So I do have triggers all around me of different memories. And some are ones I don't really appreciate. Some are great. So I'm doing my best to create a new feeling, a new, or just knowing that's what it is can really be helpful. Next, we want to interrupt the negative loop. So when you do have that trigger, have a plan to interrupt it. So again, see if you can avoid going to non-supportive habits, which can be, like I said, that could be sitting eating a whole bunch of ice cream, or drinking or smoking, whatever that is, to distract yourself from if there's some negative pain associated to it. But there are, finding more supportive ways that we can redirect our thoughts. So think about that now. What do you do to help combat these thoughts that, negative thoughts could be coming up? So we'll talk about that. So one way to do it is try establishing a mantra. And I've talked about this a lot, but, we want to go ahead and have something like a mantra that says, so if you're feeling unloved, you can repeat this phrase. It says, I'm enough and I'm worthy of love. So I'm enough, and my last broadcast was know your worth. If you're feeling ashamed of something, try this one. The past is in the past, and I am capable of writing the next chapter however I see fit. So the past is in the past, and I am capable of writing the next chapter however I see fit. If you're feeling lost, you can try this one. I trust my intuition. Things come easily to me. So that's the other thing. We can not trust our intuition. That can get us into a lot of trouble. Trust your intuition. It's very important. The other one that I want to add to is that if a mantra doesn't feel right, word it in a way and modify it in a way that your brain does accept it. And the one way I like to modify it is, again, I'll say, we may not be able to do this right now. It might be like this one, things come easily to me, because my brain all of a sudden said, no, they don't. So it's really funny. And I'll be all right, okay, you don't like this mantra. So I'll say, I know that I can learn to have things come easily to me. I want to learn how to do that right now. And then my brain's like, okay, we can learn how to do that right now. So anyway, yeah, so there's a bunch of mantras out there. Write one that works for you, that you can, when you are triggered, you can immediately bring it into play. Another really good, I want to add this to another good point is to, we want to remove and have, leave out words that say can't, shouldn't, or don't. So instead of saying, I don't want to eat pizza, say, because your brain doesn't hear the don't. It'll hear pizza. You can say, instead, I support my body with highly nutritious food, and that, or maybe I don't know how to do this right now, but I want to learn how to support my body with highly nutritious food. So that can be really helpful. Okay. And again, try some self-care. This is all about your body. This is, it's focusing on physical, mental, and spiritual well-being and happiness. So it might mean, again, going for a walk. It could be cooking a nutritious meal for yourself, planning out a night with friends. And This is really important. In order to properly participate in self-care, you must learn how to listen to your body and be in tune with what it needs. It's all about my book is learning how to listen to your body and figuring out what it needs. So if you're feeling depressed, understand that your body is probably trying to tell you to switch things up and change the way you've been treating it. This could be around food, body movement, all those things. When you're feeling achy, that is a clue that you need to take a walk, you need to stretch, um, do some yoga. If you're tired for no reason, get out and move and give your body a reason to be tired. So, um, learning those cues are very, very helpful. Okay, we're almost done. So I got a couple more points. So practice makes perfect. So, I know when I was learning how to play flute, I would be over and over and over and over again. Sometimes there'd be 4 measures that I had a hard time with. I had to play them over and over and over and over again. And it's the exact same thing. We have to allow ourselves to practice, allow ourselves to make mistakes, to learn. So practice makes perfect. Um, with more practice, you'll be more able to see and know when those triggers are happening. You'll be able to uncover why you feel the way you feel, and then you can, address those, possible negative feelings that you have and turn them and spin them into something that's supportive. So over time, you're going to be able to implement self-care easier into your routine. You'll be able to readjust the lens of perspective that you see the world through. And then also you can see the lessons in the mistakes that you've made. And I thought about this when I said the word mistakes. I see mistakes, MIS, and then TAKES. And then all of a sudden I thought about a movie being made, and they have that click, take one. And sometimes they're up to take 25 to get this scene correct, right? It's like our lives, we just take 5, or you know what I mean? So if we can look at our mistakes that way, that everyone makes them, and we make adjustments, and it gets easier, for our brains to allow those mistakes to become lessons versus, burdens that we carry with us. Lastly, you always have a choice. Okay. So here's a neat analogy. So there was a set of twins that can have the exact same childhood situation growing up, but one ended up, but they ended up on 2 entirely different paths. So the same twins, same lifestyle scenario growing up. One could get mixed up in drugs, become homeless, and find themselves in toxic relationships, while the other one goes to college, finds love, has a successful career. But this is the interesting part. So when asked how they ended up where they are today, they'll have the same answer. After everything I've been through, how could I have turned out any other way? So the moral of the story is that you always have a choice in how you interpret events, circumstances, interactions with others. And you can choose to look at what's wrong, or we can look at I don't want to say it. We can look at what's not supportive, or we can look at what is supportive. Okay. So we have a choice. Not that that's simple, not that that's always easy. I'm not saying that, but at least we know we have a choice. So to wrap this up, again, I really enjoyed being here, talking with everybody today. Please go ahead and private message me or put in the comments what your, number one takeaway was from this today. And then also, if you feel like you need some support on your journey, private message me. I'm more than happy to help. And I do want to do some shout outs for some websites that were so helpful with me tonight. And again, to my book, I gleaned from my book again, Your Personal Journey with Food, this evening, but also Chopra.com, Purposely Fairy, Psych Central, and Psychology Today. So those were some websites that really helped me put this together this evening. All right. So everybody, you have a choice, and practice that perspective view and practice your narratives and how you're going to write your remaining story. All right. Have a great night, and I'll see everyone next week. Take care.